I would love to introduce Michael Lepech. He is an associate professor of civil and environmental engineering and a senior fellow at the Woods Institute for the Environment at Stanford University. As an instructor, he has taught numerous executive education and professional education courses on topics of finance, leadership, sustainability, and entrepreneurship in the US, Brazil, France, Korea, South Africa, and China. He has co-founded 4 companies in the US and China based on his research in advanced construction materials. Michael joined Stanford University faculty from University of Michigan School of Natural Resources and Environment. Michael Fors is an executive leader in Boeing's Leadership, Learning, and Organizational Capability, LLOC team, driving transformation toward a 2025 vision. Before Boeing, he was an executive leader of learning at Microsoft, transforming Microsoft's sales, consulting services, and other divisions to achieve Microsoft's digital transformation vision. Michael is an adjunct professor at Stanford University and the University of Washington, where he teaches numerous courses on innovation and entrepreneurism. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our wonderful speakers today so you can all enjoy the wealth of knowledge they have to share with you. Thank you, Michael and Michael.
Thanks, Hannah. And Dr. Forrest, thank you so much for taking the time to spend with me today to chat about this really cool topic of entrepreneurship. So I'd like to frame today's discussion around for those that are familiar with late night U.S. television, sort of a David Letterman style top 10. In which we talk about sort of the top 10 things that can happen anywhere. And in this case, if it's possible, I'd like to talk about the top 10 things that can go wrong with a startup. Talking about some failure modes. And I think by looking at those things that can go wrong, I think there's a tremendous amount to learn there in how to prevent the things from going wrong and how to make them go right. And I know there's a few of these that I think you're thinking are probably more important than others, and maybe we can spend a little more time on them. Does that sound okay?
Sounds perfect to me, and thanks for inviting me. I'm glad to be here with you.
All right. So number 10, once again, not in any order of importance, but one that I actually think is incredibly important. Number 10 is going to be competitive landscape. How is this a challenge, and how should startups think about this?
Yeah, and I'll just say thanks. Thanks again for having me. It's April Fool's Day, right? So I was a little leery when you said, "Hey, let's do this on April 1st." I was like, "Okay, what's going on? Mr. Lepech might have some shenanigans up his sleeve." But yeah, so landscape I think is really important. And by the way, everything we're going to talk about is a system of interdependencies for a startup. So there are lots of numerous failure points as we go through these top 10. They're all interlinked as I think about them. And I'll just say as we start too that 70 to 80% of startups fail. We're going to talk about the top 10 list of reasons why they fail and what you can do about them. In terms of landscape, I'll just say in my mind the world is spinning a bit faster, and it's so funny because I was researching. I was doing a class for Columbia U actually recently, and I was looking at my whole this part of my hypothesis about the future of work and how it's changing was that it feels like the world's spinning faster, partly because of the fourth industrial revolution and all this accelerating technology. And then I went to look at the World Economic Forum, and there's some scientific proof that the world will spin a little bit 1 second faster this year than other years. Crazy, I know. But in terms of landscape, I think that means things are changing more quickly, particularly because we had the pandemic. You have, COVID unemployed, then you have the fourth industrial revolution technology still progressing, all the stuff in the cloud. And so if you're a startup, you've got to be watching your landscape more closely than ever because it's shifting faster than ever. And, the best thing that I think we've seen over the years as we've taught to startups is the idea of a PESTLE, P-E-S-T-L-E. You may have heard of that, but it's really looking at the political, economic, social, technical, legal, and environmental factors that could impact your startup. And I'll just say real quickly, because it's changing more rapidly, you shouldn't just do that once, which is a lot of what startups do. They do it once for a V1 product. You need to do it every 3 to 6 months or even more often, because the competition's changing and the landscape shifting much more quickly these days.
Now, I think that pestle framework is really useful in this case. The other thing I would say about competitive landscape is making sure that you really understand who your actual competitors are, right? And not only looking at companies that appear to be doing the same thing, but companies that are also offering a similar value proposition to the customer. Right, Zoom is not only competing with Skype and with Teams and with others, but also with many other different types of co-working platforms and even regular offices when people are allowed to return to offices. And so, seeing that competitive landscape as broadly as possible from the customer viewpoint, I think is the pestle framework is really helpful in allowing folks to do that.
Yeah, maybe one quick follow-up there too that I see is people sometimes they'll say, "Oh, we don't have any competition. We're in a really new space, maybe a new technology." Well, that's probably not true, because players that are normally not in one industry are moving into different industries, and we've seen that at Boeing with SpaceX, right? SpaceX came in and really has taken a share of the satellite market. So you have to watch out for other players who are is part of this disruption that's happening. Fueled by these new technologies in the cloud, but people will move into other industries and markets. And by the way, big companies are always watching startups to either, hopefully buy them out. If you're a startup, you'd like that, but also maybe just run over the top of them once they see that there's an opportunity that a startup is starting to, take advantage of.
Yeah, first mover advantage is a bit of a fallacy in many regards. All right, so number 9, market. How can market be a source of failure for a new startup?
Yeah, we have some colleagues at Stanford who really push for this one as a top priority, because there's so much failure around it, and a lot of it's around the size of the opportunity. So it does link to scaling, but also it's segmentation. Like, who are you going after first? We see startup folks really conflicted about who their target market is and how they're going to segment it. Who do they go after first, second, third, fourth? What order? What speed? And that creates just a whole lot of chaos in a startup, because they're really unclear about the audience that they're going to serve first and how to meet their needs, and then have it flow into future audiences. So how much do you customize and tailor for a first segment versus having the messaging and the product and its features be able to flow into other markets afterward. So I think segmentation is key, and then how to sell, which channels, and also pricing is an issue. Being able to really set a price that's valid and you can rely upon.
Talking about some red flags, just like you said, a red flag is we don't have any competitors. That's never true. Everyone has competitors. Similarly, when we ask folks, who's your market? Everyone's my market. That's also a big red flag. No, not everyone is your market. And if you think that's the case, then you don't have enough focus to truly be able to serve anyone really well. So even the most successful products, I mean, if we think about something like Windows, right, where a license on Windows still gets sold every second of the day or every couple seconds of the day, one of the most successful products, ever, even that doesn't serve everyone. And so I think it's a great point. All right, number 8, financials. And this isn't just about raising money. Raising money is always a challenge, but this is more than just raising money.
Yeah, this is really where a lot of hard work has to be done. A lot of details need to be figured out. And the decisions and assumptions that get made in a financial model and a financial plan are really strategic decisions that drive your startup. And you've got to be able to answer the tough questions about really the product, its features, the competition, the timing. All of it plays into a financial model. So those assumptions and decisions really set a lot of your strategy if you haven't already figured it out. But you should know your income, your expenses, your assets, your cash flow, and then how much external money you want, because VC money is the most expensive money you'll ever receive. They're expecting like a 9x return at least. And so you've got to be careful, because then that also dilutes your ownership. So a lot plays into this in cap tables and ownership. But you've got to have your arms around the financials. And there are people who are really strong product people who don't really want to deal with financials much. So you got to get help where you can, because financials it's something that you need to know as a startup leader, and you've got to do the due diligence on it.
Yeah, it's an interesting point in that, when you talk to an investor, they're going to, and you say, look, I'm looking to raise $5 million on a 20% share. Their first question will be, why 5 million? What do you need it for? And if that number just comes out of thin air, that's another one of those red flags, right? I want to know exactly, what does your operating stack look like? What are you going to spend this money on this quarter, next quarter, and the quarter after? And without having those specifics for folks to drill down, so much about venture capital and investing like this is about trust. Because you truly have to trust the people you're going into business with, which your investor is going into business with you. And if you don't have those numbers to back it up, and to understand those financials, that trust will never be built.
Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
All right, next up, and this is one of our heavy hitters out of the top 10, number 6, product. How does product get messed up?
Yeah, well, the product is where a lot of people focus, and for good reason. It needs to be really clear what the product is. And some startup leaders have trouble describing their product. And maybe it's because they haven't also prioritized features and know exactly what the customer wants and will pay for in a V1 or a next version. And so being really clear and prioritizing what the product is, what its features are, and doing research around the product to make sure it's differentiated with competitors. If you're looking to research it in, looking to standard sources like Gartner, that's too late. Those are lagging research data. If you're really cutting edge and differentiated, there's probably not much written about your product and its competitors. So the thing you need to do is talk to customers. You need to go out and develop some personas and really think through, what are the features that this product needs? And again, it plays into market segmentation. How does it play into that first segment and future segments of what you're building? And it's about scope, of prioritized features, and startups just aren't really clear on that. Every feature you decide to do is a trade-off for a feature you're not doing. And so being clear about that, I think, is really critical.
Yeah, it's true that you only have so much time. Can you talk a little bit about, particularly for folks coming from maybe from larger companies, how product development and product coming up with that product is a little bit different at a big company versus at a startup, and sort of what some of those differences might be for folks coming from industry, having worked for a big company, wanting to think about a startup. And yes, a lot of it starts with that product idea. How is that product development process a little bit different?
Yeah, coming to use a page from Microsoft, I led a strategy team there, and we looked at intrapreneurism and how that plays out. Some things are similar in the sense that prioritizing features is critical. It's at a big company, they may have enough resources where they can pivot and throw more money and resources at something and recover if they're seeing that something's not working. A startup, you may have a more thin edge of resources to be able to pivot as often and throw as many resources at it. You don't want to burn through a whole lot of VC money, in a haphazard way. So, but some things that are similar are getting priority around the features. I mean, when I was at Microsoft, it's a lot of the product folks are technologists, and they feel they can do anything, and so it's not okay just because you can build it that you need to go build it. It's like you get bloated feature sets that you can't accomplish in a timeline to meet a market window, because all this is meant to achieve a market window where your product's going to be hot in the market. And so I've seen it happen where you get too many features, product managers fighting over which features should go in, all saying that they have customer data, and it gets too bloated and you can't meet the timeline, so suddenly you need to start cutting out features. In a startup, that can ruin you. So you got to be really careful up front, and go conservatively with a first version, knowing you can add things and phase things in over time.
No, it's a bit of a balancing act between sort of making sure you don't have that bloated product with a ton of features, and yet delivering, thinking back to Jeff Moore's concept of whole product solution, right? You want to make sure that you don't bloat it with features that aren't necessarily offering value proposition to your focus narrow customer segment, but also this notion of whole product solution where you're providing the entire solution, not just one little bitty widget in a much bigger thing, which big companies understand well. And so can you talk maybe a little bit about this juxtaposition between whole product solution and that bloated features set?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's what's the minimum viable product that meets the customer need. And yet what we also see, and this happened in a lot of the Stanford programs, is that startup folks think about the technology or the product itself and its features and struggle with that, but don't think about the whole product model. What other kinds of services can be provided along with it that generate value that you can charge for? What about training? What about ongoing, work? There's a story out of France that I love. There was new technology to have sensors to monitor nuclear power plants and dams, and the gentleman created it out of his garage basically, and had this really cool technology that he had developed to sense if something was wrong with a plant or a factory. And he went to the leader of who managed these dams. And dams, if they break, you have all these villages downstream and cities that people will die. And so he said, hey, I've got this cool technology, and the leader said, well, let's see it. And so they did a demo, and he's like, well, what are you charging for it? And he just said, well, for the software, I don't know, maybe, I don't know what, 12,000 euros. And the leader of the dam started laughing, and he's like, are you kidding me? Do you know what happens if a dam breaks? And why haven't you thought through the services and the maintenance and the training of my people? He goes, do you know what my budget is to try to keep these dams safe, and similarly for nuclear power plants? And our friendly startup gentleman who went through our program, by the way, and so we helped him, said, well, I think I could go back and think through some of these whole product features, but if I did that, what would you be willing to pay? And the leader of the dam said, how about 300,000 euros for the dam? And our startup CEO said, whoa, okay, great. He tried to keep his composure. And then the leader said, by the way, I have 12 dams, and I'll pay 300,000 for each dam. And so, yeah. So it's that kind of story about whole product model.
Totally. All right, next up, number 5, technology disruption. How can that be a challenge when it comes to startups?
Yeah, oh my gosh, I talk about this a lot because this is really fourth industrial revolution. And just quickly, if you're not familiar with it, I'll just say real fast. The first one, was all 1800s, think Charles Dickens, mechanization. It was all about steam and water power. So think, factories in London belching out smoke. And then fast forward 1900s, Henry Ford, assembly line, electricity. That was the next one, the second revolution. Third was the personal computing revolution. People still think we're there, IT servers in the basement. But we've moved, and the holy grail at Microsoft was to put the operating system in the cloud. And so having Azure or AWS from Amazon and having cloud technology has changed the world. And we don't even realize all the computing power now that we have. It's not just putting Excel and PowerPoint and Word in the cloud. It is AI, it is machine learning, it is advanced robotics, it's quantum computing that's coming. This disruption is changing the world and will change all of our lives. It'll affect healthcare, manufacturing, agriculture, everything. And so this is a great opportunity for all of you as startup folks, because it is a greenfield blank canvas, and people are moving in fast because there's a lot of disruption in markets happening. But it also means if you're a startup person, you've got to watch this because things are changing out from under you. It's not okay to do an analysis of your competition and the technology, and then just assume as you build out V1 over the course of months and a year that nothing has changed. And that's where startups will fail, is they're not staying up on the technology that's changing every few months.
I mean, doing a startup is not a full-time job. It's like 4 full-time jobs. Mm-hmm. And so it's hard to kind of keep abreast of everything that's going on while also keeping your head down and focused on what you need to do that day, which is where really great investors can be important, because and forming that advisory board and that board of directors when you get to the point where you're taking institutional money, because ideally they can also help you to stay abreast of all those things. Yeah, indeed. All right. Let's see here. Where are we now? I think we're on number 7. And this is a biggie. Oh, excuse me, number 6. A biggie. Customer need. How does customer need play into a potential failure mode?
Yeah, I mean, so much hinges on this. Probably everything. You know, we talked about the prioritized feature set, but it's how well people can articulate, you know, basically a problem statement in one sentence, or the customer need or pain in one sentence. And is it really clear? You know, if you're starting to look at who your market is, how you segment it, it connects to everything else, right? Financials, prioritized features, but being really clear that you're solving this customer need or pain, and you're looking to do it uniquely or differentiated from everyone else. It's not okay to just come along as a startup and you know, reinvent what some big company's already doing to meet needs. You just won't succeed, because then you have problems with loyalty and trying to acquire customers, which we'll also talk about. But it's really honing in on that customer need that you can uniquely meet, that is differentiated. You know, we always said at Microsoft, the customer is king or queen. You know, the customer it's all about the customer. And, you know, at worst case, you stay disconnected from the customer and you're not close enough and haven't done enough sampling to really understand the customer, don't have any early testimonials and, you know, first adopters. We see startup people who feel like they're assuming they know what's needed and can be very wrong and haven't. And then we say, who have you talked to? Which customers? How many? And they can't tell us, or it's only been 2 or 3. You know, that's not enough. And you know, some product people, they're very much into the technology and maybe a little more introverted and don't want to get out and talk to customers. It's uncomfortable, but it's got to be done by someone and who's really out there informing the startup, because everything flows from that customer need and pain. It formulates the strategy or vision of the startup, which then everything flows from that strategy and vision.
Yeah, you know, in the venture capital investing programs that we do, I use a line from a famous Silicon Valley investor, that when you meet with an entrepreneur, what you want to hear from them. And so for those that are thinking about, you know, doing the kind of elevator pitch, too quick thing, we tell them, make a traction sandwich. Talk about traction. Do your customers really need your product? And what kind of traction are you having with real customers who are paying? These are not freemium things. These are not users that are just doing it for free, or you know, friends and family that are trying it out, who are real customers that are liking your product. So first thing, talk about traction. Second thing, talk about whatever it is you're doing. And then the third thing, talk again about traction. And so you want to make that traction sandwich. Traction, pitch, traction. Because for an investor, traction's everything. If you can show that customers truly need your product and are willing to pay for it, everything else will flow. And so, yeah, we tell folks in pitching, for quick pitches, traction sandwich. And then that goes right back to customer need.
That's great. Love it. Yeah.
All right. Next up, one as a university faculty member that's near and dear to my heart, research and development, and how investors don't fund research projects.
There's some great case studies where people were funded with, you know, multi-millions of dollars from VCs, and the product still needed a lot more research and development. And so you burn through all your money trying to finish research and development to even get to productization. And, you know, that happens in big co's too, you know, where you have a research and development team that's building out something or thinking they're going to help, infuse something in a product, and it's not ready and it's hard to transfer over and all that. But for a startup, knowing how much more R&D is needed for a product, and if it can really even be done, because there's sometimes great ideas that get funded, and there's a big assumption that yes, we leap of faith that we can finish this research and development, and then you find out, oh, it can't even be done, or certainly not in the timeline with the money we have. So being really astute about really how much R&D is left, and can we do it? Can it really be done? And then of course there's the problem of, that's great that you did the R&D. Can you create a prototype, and can it be potentially mass produced? Whether it's digital or physical, can you scale it as a product? Can it get productized? There's some great products sitting out there that can't scale enough to be productized. We've talked about advanced battery technology out of Livermore Labs. It exists. It just is too expensive to scale. Too many expensive products materials need to go into it, and it's just there's not the manufacturing capability to make it scale for a startup. So that's one example, but that gets at some of the R&D and productization piece.
Well, and one of the other pieces to that is also this often a misunderstanding by the founder or the entrepreneur on the cost distribution between research and development. You feel great when the research is done, you've got this, the idea works, and then you're like, okay, we're almost there. Development is far more expensive, and this gets to that productization. Development is actually more expensive than the initial research, because you have to get to that point where it is productizable. And so as you think about the financials, we were talking before about how everything's connected together, making sure that you realize that development is going to be 3x or more expensive than all the research you had to do to get to this point, and making sure that you're budgeting for that appropriately with regard to fundraising and also with the staff and other resources you're going to need to get there.
Yeah. There's a great story about EInk, the ink that's used for the Kindle, where they received a lot of venture capital money originally and failed because they hadn't done enough research, and they couldn't get it to a state of development where they could productize it. And so the company went bankrupt, the startup. It failed. But a couple people kept the idea going in their garage and found a way to not only finish the research on their own, but also then to get it to that productization development stage where people could actually buy it. But it took the startup failing first before it could come back from the ashes. Yeah,
right on. All right, another one of our heavy hitters coming down to the last few on the top 10 list. And this one I know is near and dear to your heart with your background. Leadership, team, and culture. How can that be a problem for a startup or a small team?
Oh my gosh, there's so much to talk about here. And this is, this gets called the number one reason why startups fail. Everyone thinks it's financials, or it's the product, or it's the go-to-market. The leadership, team, and culture can make something fail more quickly and faster and worse than anything else. Most people don't have a good plan around this. They just assume we'll start bringing people on board, and we'll just, find good people who have expertise that can help us, and not
my buddy knows how to do something. Let's have him do it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. A lot of times, friends and buddies, and and so then when
we always tell folks, if you've got too many people with the same last name on the cap table, this is not an investable company. This is a family business.
It's a hobby. It's a family business. Keep it that way. Don't try to make it a startup that's going to scale globally. Just keep it a hobby, family business, and private if you want. So as you start to bring people together, first of all, there's a leadership issue. The leader who got the idea started and maybe got it funded with VC money may absolutely not be the right person to lead the company forward. And because they can't build an organization, a high-performing organization that really can execute and scale a product. Maybe they're all about the big ideas. And we have some leaders today who get in big companies that were startups, who get criticized for being big idea people who can't execute. I won't call out any names, but you can guess a few probably from the media. And Lepech knows, you know who I'm talking about, Mr. Lepech. So anyway, the leadership is a real issue. You don't want to have to fire a CEO or CTO, and I've been involved in that actually in startups, and it's brutal. I was involved in a situation where the CTO was a little bit of a bully, and the chief software developer, really great kind of a larger stature man, really tall. We were meeting as a leadership team and talking about the issues the startup was having, and when everyone walked out of the room and I was sitting with this gentleman, he actually started having tears because he felt like he'd been bullied by the CTO so much. So actually, it got involved in the firing of this CTO, which was kind of brutal. But worse is firing a CEO, because that's a chance really where the venture capitalists, if there's money involved, will feel like they need to swoop in and actually take over. And so talk about ownership dilution, if you or a chance for a startup to fail is when people see that a CEO has to be taken out. And by the way, it's worse though if a CEO stays and they're really bad as a leader, because people start not wanting to come and work with that in that startup. They'll start not showing up, and you'll see all kinds of cultural issues. But a lot of things go into this leadership team and culture. It's the culture and values. We've seen startups that have grown that have struggled with their culture. And you've seen Uber having that problem, for example. They had major culture issues around culture and values. So not doing this intentionally and having a strategy. There's a whole leadership system that I teach that gets at leadership team and culture to really create a high-performing organization. If you don't have that, which most people don't, and they don't think about it, it's a real chance for failure.
Yeah. So when we're teaching our venture capital investing, right, and we're giving people pointers on sort of what do you look for in those early stages, we say the first thing you look for is team. The second thing you look for is team. The third thing you look for is team. And then you can start looking at some other things, because a great team will always figure it out. A second-class team will screw up even the best ideas.
Yeah.
And so we think that you invest in people, not in companies.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Yeah, the VCs are looking to see what kind of background you have, how strong you are as a leader. Do you have a good team around you? Is the team really working well together? They'll invest in that first, thinking that the financials and the product will pivot maybe numerous times. And they assume that. They're okay with that. It doesn't have to stay the same product and feature set and financials that they pitched to get the money. And so they're investing in the people and the team first to make those pivots and bring something to life.
It kind of goes back to that comment I made about trust, right? And you have to trust people. You cannot trust a product. You cannot trust a specific go-to-market strategy. You have to trust people.
Yeah, it comes down to some of these intangibles, right? I mean, everyone wants to focus on ones and zeros and technology and financials, and yet it comes down to the intangibles a lot of times, whether a startup makes it or not.
Yeah, that comes into some of the due diligence stuff that we talk about sometimes. Like, due diligence on what? This is an idea, 3 people, and a passion. What am I going to do due diligence on other than maybe those individuals? All right, come up the last couple. Customer acquisition. I think this has a lot to do with how hard it is to acquire customers.
Well, yeah, so this is an area that I see startup folks not focus on enough. They assume if the technology is good enough, if it's differentiated and has the right feature set, that you build it and they will come. But there's a cost to acquiring customers that's often not thought about until someone has to sit down and put pencil to paper around the financials. And it's like, what? I have to figure out how much it costs to acquire one customer and then multiply that times how many customers I think I'll have. It's just something that startup folks don't think about enough. And it can be expensive to acquire customers. You have to think through your marketing and sales approach. And so that needs to be built in. And then the other piece that goes right along with that is retention and loyalty. So if you do get them, how do you keep them and make them loyal? But one thing we see a lot of is, the thought that, well, we're just going to acquire customers, even if the customers have some other product that they like and they're using from some other company, like a big company. And so, try to acquire customers who are loyal to Apple. That's not easy, and you're probably not going to do it, because people are super loyal to another product and company, even if it doesn't have exactly the feature set that you might be offering, because yours is differentiated. You can't just assume because you have a certain product and technology that you build it, they're going to come, and you're just like a magnet going to attract all these people with money who are going to switch over to you.
Yeah. You talked about, how hard it is to acquire customers. This notion of, oh, it's just going to go viral. Nothing, very few things, if anything, goes viral on its own. There's a lot going on behind the scenes to push virality forward. And so to think that your product, well, it's just going to catch on and go viral, that is not a go-to-market strategy. That's a hope that it will be very difficult to rely upon. All right, our last one, and it's one that any successful startup will have to cope with, but can certainly be a source of failure: scale.
Yeah, a lot of startups think small, and one of the things we do at Stanford, which I love, and it's a Silicon Valley mentality, I think, is it's about going big. There was at Microsoft, there was a phrase that was the unwritten cultural rule, which is go big or go home. And with startups, I think you've got to think bigger. That makes it more difficult. It's not just a small, product you're going to sell around a city or even a region. And we see this as we worked in Europe a lot with the EU. Some of the folks in France have thought just about the French market and maybe just the northern French market. And we're like, no, think all France, think all EU, think global. And that means you've got to rethink your vision and strategy and your financials and your go-to-market. And so everything flows from the size and the scale and speed that you want to go to the scale. But if you are truly cutting edge, differentiated, say you're working on some new fourth industrial revolution technology that's never been done in the world, and you really have done your research and homework, you should want to go big. And so we encourage people to think big, but you've got to then scale everything associated with the product and its features and financials and go-to-market strategy and everything else to go big, phasing in a strategy in a smart way, region by region, country by country, because you have different laws in different countries that would allow you to go into their markets. And so that gets at the scaling complexity is where can you go? Where should you go? In what order? And we see startup folks struggling with that. First, even conceptualizing going big, and then really starting to struggle to think through which regions, which countries, in which order.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. All right, so that's the top 10. Roughly the top 10 list. I think it was really good. We're going to actually shift over some questions. We got some great questions coming in from the participants. So the first one is really related to some of your experience at big companies, but also working with startups. And you already alluded a little bit to the difference between being an intrapreneur, working at a big company, but working to be entrepreneurial, and an entrepreneur. When we talked a little bit about product development and stuff like this, what are some other big differences between intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship, especially vis-a-vis folks that might want to transition from being in a big company to starting their own company because they think they've got a great idea?
Yeah, I've seen it go both ways, actually. I've been on the acquiring side where I've had leaders of startups that we acquired report to me. And that was interesting because that's a different culture set and mentality of coming into a big co. But then also at big companies, I'll use Microsoft as an example. Everyone wanted to go do a startup. And so then the question is, do they want to give their ideas to Microsoft, their best ideas? Can they go work on them? Will Microsoft support them? Which Microsoft was pretty good at, listening to ideas and seeing if it was a new feature for a product or a whole new product. Or does the individual want to save something special for themselves and go do a startup? And I've seen people go do startups and come back to big co's. We call them retreads at Microsoft. They go off, do a startup, come back. But the idea that they could go off and do a startup was often a dream for them. And because they felt like they understood enough of the elements, having developed product in a big company, that they could go and adapt to a startup. Now, there's always that transition period of being able to scale down and realize you're going to have fewer people, fewer resources. I think a lot of the things they miss, or that they're surprised that they lack, is the financial support, the sales and marketing support that they had in a big co. They were probably a specialist in a product area or a technology area, but they didn't realize how much support they were getting from the big co as they were developing product in a big co. So as soon as you go to the startup, you need to rely upon an ecosystem more. You may not be able to build out in a startup all the people and all the resources you need. You may not hire a sales manager or leader first right away out of the chute. That may come later. You may get CFO help that's more on loan, that's more part-time than being able to hire a CFO immediately. So you have to do a lot more of all the different aspects on your own when you move to a startup. The other thing I'd say about a big co is they need help with innovation and entrepreneurship. So you get this concept of intrapreneurship. And one of the ways I started working with Stanford originally was having Stanford come to Microsoft and think through, how could we apply internal venture capital gates to product development within a big co? Because within a big co, you start to lose sort of that, sometimes that cutting edge entrepreneurial spirit in really thinking through, you've got to have the product, the financials, and the marketing all together before even a big co should be funding a product. And so you've got that dynamic going on internally. So a lot to talk about. Big co's acquiring startups, that there's a dynamic there. People leaving a big co to go do a startup. You can think about some that have been successful. Expedia was one from Microsoft.
Wow.
And then also just creating the entrepreneurial spirit within a big co. This intrapreneurism is an opportunity.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is most surprising when we're doing our entrepreneurial education programs, when we meet with folks who did come after many years, decades in a large organization, is just how scary it is to start your own company and to do this. When you're sitting there worried about making payroll, because that's now your thing, when you're taking money out of your personal checking account to pay people because the pay period's up and people have to get paid, to realize that all of those support mechanisms around compliance, around marketing, around financials, around everything was always sort of in the background. You kind of knew it was there, but you didn't realize how much it was relied upon. Those are huge differences. And look, being an entrepreneur, being a founder is one of the greatest experiences of my life. But it's scary at times. It's a roller coaster, and I think that's one of the things that I think is biggest about that culture difference. All right, we're gonna go through a few more questions that have come in, and some that I know that you have some experience with. There's a question about precautions about establishing an entrepreneurial venture in developing countries like Nepal. I know you've done some work on entrepreneurship and startup with the UN in Afghanistan. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, startups in a developing country are a way to really stabilize an economy and to create jobs. And so I think it should be a huge focus and priority for governments in developing and post-conflict countries. It is in some, it's not as much in others. I think it should be. Once you do a startup there, there may not be the infrastructure or the ecosystem that can support startups. And so, we see that the startups are a little bit hanging on their own. They don't have a Silicon Valley set of, part-time CFOs you can bring in, or sales and marketing people, or even just peers, colleagues where you can talk about startups, whether it's in your space or your product space or not. It's who do you talk to about this stuff? And so, we've looked at engineers, and particularly female engineers, and started teaching them things like artificial intelligence. And then had some coaches, some professors, particularly out of Japan, be able to coach them on artificial intelligence and have them think about how AI could be translated into products and services in Afghanistan. And it's just, it's just like blazing a new trail to try to get this to happen. But the women engineers are so excited to even be thinking about this and being able to see how to make this happen, that they are really ambitious and passionate. And to Stanford's credit, to give kudos to Stanford, Stanford allowed modules on innovation and entrepreneurship to be used for free for people going through these UN programs. And so, there's some really great entrepreneurial work going on in other parts of the world as well, outside of Afghanistan, Iraq, parts of Africa. So, kudos to the UN for driving this, not just for women, but especially for women, for all entrepreneurs that are out there on their own in developing countries and in post-conflict countries. I would say they need to think globally for partnerships and for mentoring and coaching. So they need to think out of their region to get help if they're going to be successful, at least regionally, if not globally, to bring in really great experts to help coach them on being successful.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Back to one of your favorite topics. How do you choose an effective leadership or executive team for your startup?
Yeah. Well, again, it starts with the leader. You've got to think about this leader as being someone who knows the technology enough to work with the product folks. So they may have a technical background. A lot of them may. And yet they're bold and brash enough to be able to go stand in front of venture capitalists and sell their idea and get money, if that's the way they want to do it, or angel investors, or be smart enough to try to figure out how to bootstrap it with friends and family, and then they have to translate into execution mode of being able to scale. And most people don't have all three of those parts, or all those elements. And so is it a combination? I mean, even big companies, they're more successful with a 1-2 punch. Like I grew up in Intel. Intel Corporation was great. It had Andy Grove, visionary technologist, great with business, and Craig Barrett, who was an operations guy who could execute like crazy. You think of Apple, it had Jobs, Steve Jobs, and Tim Cook, and now Jobs is gone, and Cook is there, and so. Even Microsoft, when it was Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer, there was this kind of 1-2 punch. And so it may not just be one person who can do it all. You got to build a team that complements each other, starting with the leaders, but then really thinking through the team itself. Who's going to be the best chief technology officer? Who's going to eventually move into sales and marketing and finances? And is the chemistry right? What criteria do you want from each of these leaders? And then what's the culture and value set that you're all going to agree to? At least some team charter, if nothing else, let alone identifying the values and observable cultural behaviors you want out of the team and the organization as it starts to grow. That proactive piece will be really important in serving the startup well, doing it up front sooner than later, than trying to retrofit it afterwards. But the way I like to think about startup people is the term, and I don't know if I created it or borrowed it, so sorry, I don't really know this. I don't remember the source of it, but the term envisioneer. You can envision it, you can sell it, you can also engineer it and execute with excellence on it to productize it and scale it. Not easy for one person or even an effective set of team members to be able to go do that.
Yeah, totally. All right, so somewhat connected to this, and I'll give my viewpoint on this first, and we'll hear what you think. How can someone from a non-tech background start a company? Any suggestions on where and how to start? And I think we had talked before about the importance of understanding customers. And very often, folks that are non-tech are really great at understanding customers, are really great at knowing what that market need is. And so therefore, I would say a non-tech person starts with really leveraging your skills around knowing customers and what customer pain points really are and how to potentially solve that burning need, that hair on fire need that a customer has. And then you surround yourself with the necessary technical folks to deliver on that need.
Totally agree. I think it starts with customer and going after these things that maybe the more serious technical people don't feel as comfortable doing. It is the customer need. It is the connection of talking to customers, creating personas, thinking through the competition, the landscape, all those pieces that are so needed up front that then complement what the technical people can go do. I do think a non-technical person can be very successful, but they need to have credibility with the technical people, or it may not work. So they've got to know enough about the technology, be able to speak to it. And then also in the financials, of course, be able to look at the financial numbers and make those decisions, those assumptions that go into the financials that are both business related and technical related. So they're almost a bridge between non-technical and technical, and bringing it all together. And they're joiners, they're connectors. And it happens at Big Coast too. That's what a product manager does. They may not be fully technical, but they are the bridge between the vision and strategy and all these pieces that need to happen around go-to-market and financials, and the technology people who are building the product.
Yeah, I know, like managing that PRD, right? That product requirements document. Totally.
Yep.
I guess somewhat connected to this as well. How does all this change if you're offering a service rather than a product? And does it change?
I think it does, because there's a different service mentality that's needed. It's not so much about product design and development. It's more about ongoing service and consumption of services. And so the business model is different, which means the financials are different. The go-to-market is different. And so it's just a different vein that needs to be, there's a little bit of a switch, a context switch that needs to happen. And we see this at Boeing. I mean, Boeing has a services organization where it looks like there's a $50 billion revenue market there for services, maintenance, upgrades of planes, training pilots, all this stuff Boeing hasn't really been involved in the past. Yeah. But, as we work with the BGS group, the Boeing Global Services Group, it's a different mentality. And one thing they always keep saying to us is, hey, we've got to inculcate a service mindset. It's different. We're not like Boeing Commercial or Boeing Defense and Space, who are designing and developing commercial aircraft, jet fighters and space vehicles. It is all about a service mentality of upgrades and maintenance and services that we can provide to customers in an ongoing way. So it is a little bit of a context switch, and everything has to flow with that mentality.
Yeah, right on. How do you validate a good idea?
Ooh, yeah. I think people have a good idea. They've gotten some kudos for a good idea, and they call it good, and then they keep boldly going with it and sort of testing, but even not listening to people who might question it over time because they're pretty convinced it's good. And you kind of need that to be successful in a startup. You need someone who's pretty bold and brash and going to, carry forward, because there's so many factors that can go against you. At the same time, I'll take a page from Andy Grove, our CEO from Intel. He wrote a book on this, Only the Paranoid Survive. So how do you be paranoid and go test your idea? How do you go with many customers in different segments that you plan to go into? How do you create personas? How do you look at scenarios where you really think the product's going to play out and you can validate this idea? You go talk to experts, go look at the landscape, go to even people outside of the industry and see if they think it's a good idea. It's amazing how much people will share in the entrepreneurial world. I mean, everyone's worried, oh no, I shouldn't share my idea, someone's going to steal it. It's actually the more people you talk to and get feedback to validate your idea, and you share, that you find new partners, and you get great advice, and they're probably not going to steal your idea. You can create an NDA if you're really worried. But
if your idea is stealable just by sharing it, then you probably don't have enough intellectual property protection. You probably don't have enough, trade secret protection or anything. It will be stolen by someone else eventually.
Yeah.
And so therefore, if you're that scared about it, one of the other things is I actually think the question is almost somewhat misphrased, in that you don't validate a good idea. Others validate your good idea.
Yeah, and it's true. I think, if you have a good idea, you have some, what we like to refer to as secret sauce, right? There's some secret sauce you have. You're probably not going to give away all the details of it, but you're sharing the overall idea. And if someone can replicate your secret sauce, well, probably not. And just to what you're saying, I think, Mike, is you don't validate, everyone else does, and you've got to go do the due diligence. So you've got to have or someone on your team's got to go do that. And this is where, again, someone who's maybe non-technical can go do this, or someone who's technical and maybe is golden because maybe they've gotten a technical MBA, or they have some of that business acumen and business savvy, can go out and do this as well.
Sure. So two last quick questions. How does an individual introduce and encourage intrapreneurship in a company? And I know you've spent decades doing this exact thing.
Yeah. Well, I had I kind of had a poster child at Microsoft that I used to love. We spent at Microsoft a lot of money, tens of millions, on development of a product which was the original Surface. If you remember, the original Surface, it wasn't a laptop, it was a coffee table. And it could do a few things. It could absorb your photos off your phone, and it could do certain things. But it was technology because it was proving out some new technology. And so the poster child was that, should we spend tens of millions to do R&D on something like that when there really wasn't a market for it? It wasn't, it could be productized, but there was no scale. No one was buying it. It ended up being in lobbies of cell phone stores, and, where people had to wait, or doctors' offices. I don't know if any of you on the line have an original Surface, the coffee table. It's probably not. It's in a museum. So in my mind, it's got to be, something where it can scale, and you can introduce ideas within a company to say, look, we've got to be careful with shareholder money. We shouldn't do R&D just for R&D's sake. Let's really be smart about bringing together the product idea, the marketing, the finances. And so that's what we did, is bring together a team up front of financial people, go-to-market people, and product people, and said, let's get smarter up front about the product idea, get that signed off in a series of gates within a company like Microsoft, and then we know that we're better with a viable product for the market than if we just spend money on creating technology for technology's sake. Now, all that technology that was created was used and carried forward, and the name Surface that was trademarked is, well, it's used in a big way. So it wasn't all lost. It was just that we felt we could do it better than the way we were doing it. And so I think, being able to explain that story and get people bought into that concept for entrepreneurism is really vital if you're doing this in a big company.
Totally. So last question, quick answer. I have my thoughts as well. When's it time to walk away from a startup versus pivoting?
Oh, wow. I've seen startups pivot a lot. And, I think when you see that the financials don't work and the product's not working, or there's someone else in the market who's taken over, and you just, you kind of run up against a wall, and you're not seeing customers gravitate towards you, or it's impossible to acquire them anymore. You're starting to see it slow down, and no matter what you try, it's not working. I think people should not be afraid of failure. First of all, you should iterate and rapid prototype when you're in a startup, so you learn from failure fast and pivot, as you need to. Not so fast you're whiplashing your entire team, but pivot as you need to, and do everything you can to be successful. But then, also not be afraid to walk away if you have to. Yeah. The most successful entrepreneurs have failed multiple times. And so I think we as humans have this fear of failure, and we, it's just learning. It's all just learning. Bill Gates always said the best learning is when we fail. It's not when we're successful. We don't learn enough. It's when you fail.
For sure. I guess I would say you can pivot forever. You can bootstrap forever. When the passion's gone, that's when you have to wrap it up. Yeah. So in that line, I want to thank Dr. Michael Force from Boeing for joining us today. For those that are out there, if you're looking for more help in launching your startup, check out our Idea to Market online course, which is linked in your webinar console. And once again, thanks, Michael, for joining us today. It's really been a pleasure.
Thanks, Mike, for having me. Thanks for inviting me. Great to be here. I'm just unplugged as a resource here for anyone who needs help. So glad to be with you all.
Awesome. Hannah?
Thank you all for joining us today. I think this was absolutely fabulous. We've heard from some of our viewers that you are both extremely quotable. So just FYI. Again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Force and Lepech. This was really awesome. And we look forward to talking to you all again. Thank you all again so much, and have a great day.